Today I want to have a look at the World War II skirmish game Undaunted North Africa by Osprey Publishing. This game is the second game in the series, the first game being Undaunted Normandy, but I'm not going to have a look at this game in this video. Okay, back to Undaunted North Africa. This is a skirmish game which pits the British long-range desert group versus the Italians. The goal of the game is for the long-range desert group to destroy the Italian infrastructure like an airfield and a supply dump, while the Italians are to hold the objectives. The game is a squad level game where one counter equals one man, and the mechanics of the game are similar to Undaunted Normandy, but Undaunted North Africa incorporates the use of vehicles such as scout cars for the Italians and for the British, and an Italian tank. The vehicles are represented by templates where the different man counters sit on the template to crew the vehicles. Okay. The mechanics of this game is unique. It uses a deck building game mechanic for command and control and a D10 for combat. The deck building game mechanic essentially lets players select adds to add cards from a supply to their deck, which they can draw later to increase the power of their deck. Scenarios for this game, there's about 13 of them, last for 1 to 1.5 hours, but I've got to emphasize that the winning strategies may only become apparent for both sides after a few playings. Okay, we'll move on now to look at the game on the table. A good place to start with this game is a scenario book. I'm looking at scenario 3 and the anvil. If you look down here, you'll see the cards that you'll need. So listing here is the cards that either go into your deck or to your supply deck for the British long range desert group, and the same over here for the Italians deck or the supply stacks. That'll become clear a little bit later. Over here, have a look, you pick the tiles from the box to set up the terrain for this particular scenario. So we'll note that you've got forts that the Italians are defending, and the British long range desert group start in their scout cars down here. You'll notice that the counters start on the template card, and the counter for the vehicle goes on the map. Okay, now we're looking at the game setup, and I want to point out the counters and the components. Looking here, you'll see the objectives for the game are marked by the flag counters. So they're the objectives that the British long-range desert group have to take to win the game. The other objectives that the Italians have to win is to destroy the sergeant and the staff sergeant. Here, they have to be eliminated. I want to point out as well as that you'll notice that the counters represent the individual soldiers that sit in the vehicle template. Okay, and the patrol truck is represented by the patrol truck counter there. The pilot truck, the counter is represented by the pilot truck there. Note there's an Italian scout car, which in this game is empty because all of the Italians are in the forts, and the scout car is here. This counter here is an initiative counter. I'll get to that later, and depending on whose side has the initiative, the counter faces up for the Italians, or this way, the Scorpion side for the British. Another thing about the game I want to point out is these markers with the binoculars. These are scouted markers. In the game, we'll get to it a little bit in the next shot, you can't move onto a tile unless the area has been scouted already by a scout. I'll explain that later. Another thing that is interesting is you'll see that there's a number here. The gunner is number 4, pilot truck is number 7. These are the numbers, a 2-hit number on a D10 to hit that particular counter or vehicle. Last here, before I get into some more details of the game, it's very important is the deck building mechanic. You have to separate the cards into a supply stack, a deck, and your hand of 4 cards. No, there's 4 cards here. The idea is that you're going to select options from your hand to put cards from the supply into your deck, and you can draw these cards from your deck to go into your hand to increase your capacity or powers during the game. I'll stop there, we'll go to the card section. Now I'd like to take a look at an example of card play. If you look here, there are 4 cards in your hand per round. The first thing both players do is they bid for initiative. So if they want to get initiative this turn, they might bid for a high number, but if they don't really care about getting the initiative, they may only bid a low number. So as an example, I'm going to bid a 1, a low number, not expecting to get the initiative this turn. Okay, let's suppose the Italian player, that would mean that the Italian player goes first if they bid over 1. So let's suppose now the Italians have their turn and it's my turn. The first thing I want to do this round is I want to move the pilot truck. If you look here, the pilot truck is driven by the staff sergeant. So the options I have are any one of these options written on the card, and I'm not going to explain all of them in this video, or the option here, driving the car. So I'm going to play the staff sergeant card for my first card, which enables me to move the pilot truck if I choose the drive option. So I'm going to move the pilot truck 2 spaces. Now I'd just like to point out that you can't drive or move into places that aren't scouted. We'll get to that in a minute. That icon there says that the terrain is just too rough for the pilot truck to drive into at all. So that would be my first card. The second card I'd like to play is the scout card. Now if you look here, the scout, I can play scout for 2 spaces. So I'll play the scout card, and here is a scout piece. For 1 movement point, the scout gets out of the pilot truck onto the terrain piece, and for the second movement point, the scout will move into the rough terrain, and I can put, because he's scouted, he can move into an unscouted area, and I can put a scouted counter down. The last card I'd like to play is the warrant officer, choosing the bolster option for 2. This is where the deck building component of the game comes in. You add cards to your deck so you can increase your options. So I'm going to bolster my deck from the supply by 2 cards. I've already decided that I want to add the machine gunner to shoot with the machine gunner at a later turn to my discard pile, because that's where the bolster goes. And I want to add the sniper card so I can use the sniper in another round. So I've added these 2 cards to my discards, okay, and they stay there until, and my next round I will draw 4 new cards. 1, 2, 3, 4. Once I play these cards, these discards will get reintegrated and shuffled in the deck, and then we can start again and move on. Okay, the last thing I'd like to mention about the game is that there is a lot of strategy in the game, and a lot of different ways, strategies you need to do to win. You'll only find out by playing the game a few times. Okay, thank you.